During the latest Biden bashing segment on the Fox propaganda show The Five, in which they react to a clip of Joe Rogan interviewing Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Jesse Waters seems perplexed and expressed surprise that the Democratic Party, unlike the Republican Party, isn't a cult, and in so doing left himself vulnerable to a hilarious comment from our queen, Jessica Tarlov. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, so I've got 2 clips to play, actually probably 3 for context, but we're going to start with the first one in which the 5 react to a clip from a Joe Rogan interview in which he chats with The Rock.
I have friends who support Trump. I have friends who support Biden. I have friends.
Do you really have friends who support Biden?
I do.
Come
on.
on.
No. Here's what I do. I have friends. Thank you. That's a good check because that's important. This is important context.
They support the Democratic Party.
I have friends who are loyal to the party.
Yes, and
Okay.
they're progressive.
Right.
So that's the clip that prompted this exchange right here that we're about to play between Jesse Waters and Jessica Tarlov.
But what The Rock said is interesting because there is no Biden voter. I've never seen a Biden bumper sticker. I've never seen a Biden T-shirt, a Biden hat.
Have you spoken to your mother?
My mother isn't a Biden voter. She's an anti-Trump voter. And that's what all the Democrats were last time.
So they're actually in Nashville during this episode. They're in front of a live audience or live right-wing audience, hence the lack of laughs. But that comment from Jessica Tarlov is hilarious. And I want to remind everybody of what exactly Jesse Waters' mother believes about Jesse Waters and the current state of politics, because it's amazing. But in terms of the sentiment, this surprise that the Democratic Party is not a cult of personality which surrounds President Biden the way that the Republican Party is a cult of personality that surrounds Donald Trump is a disconnect. A lot of conservative commentators just don't understand it. Like, wow, we're cultishly, subservient to this particular person. Why isn't the Democratic Party that way with their leader? And isn't that a weakness? I would argue it's not a weakness. And I mentioned this in a previous video. There's a great article on The Bulwark written by a guy named Nick Grossman, and it's called "The Media Still Doesn't Get Biden Voters." And we're not going to read the whole thing, but basically it points out the asymmetry. It's like the conservative and mainstream media don't agree on much, but one point of consensus is that everyone should work harder to understand Trump supporters. The implicit message: you don't have to agree with the populist right, but you should be listening to, empathizing with, and engaging with them more. And it cites a number of examples from a number of publications over the years. And then it goes down here. Seeing these arguments, I was struck by the asymmetry of our political moment. I've never seen centrists like, I think it's Matthew Iglesias, say to people on the right or center that it's important to read progressives, even if they're super woke, or whatever the left-wing equivalent of Hananiah's racism is, nor have I seen traditional conservatives like David Brooks call for empathy with people on the left or claim that any left-wing extremism is merely an inevitable reaction to centrist and conservatives' elites' mistakes. Reporters don't do safaris to Biden country seeking to understand the voters who put him in the White House. While there are pieces explaining how, for example, black women in Georgia suburbs made a difference in the 2020 election, there's nothing approaching the ongoing coverage of white men in Ohio diners, okay? And basically it goes into the thing where the fact that the Democratic Party is not a cult doesn't mean that that's where the analysis ends. As a matter of fact, that should make people more curious. Okay, well, if they're not cultishly devoted to this particular person, shouldn't people in the center and on the right also try to engage with Biden supporters to try to understand why they would support Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump or even just anybody whom they are crazy about? President Obama enjoyed a degree of cult of personality I would argue was nowhere near as sinister or as deranged as what we saw and what we're currently seeing from MAGA. But there was like an affirmative fixation with Barack Obama, this incredibly charismatic, generational candidate. He was the first black president. There was a lot to be inspired by, and he ran on a transformative message. But that's not necessarily the standard. People shouldn't, when they go to assign their vote, when they go to support somebody politically, you could make the argument that it may not be wise to do what we've seen, this kind of populist trend that we've seen with the right? I mean, this idea that instead of making a rational choice or choosing between, the lesser of two evils or the greater good of two imperfect options. This idea that we can only support somebody if we're cultishly devoted to them. I mean, the Trump movement is the embodiment of that. And so I just find it funny that Jesse Waters is like, this is really an astute observation. There are no Biden supporters. There are only anti-Trump supporters. Okay, so what? A vote's a vote. Support's support. You can be motivated affirmatively for a person's message. You can also vote for somebody because they're antithetical to somebody you staunchly oppose. These are perfectly legitimate. And I just think that article, again, by Nicholas Grossman, is worth reading. And people like Jesse Waters should try to engage. Of course, Jesse Waters doesn't want to engage with it in good faith, so it's a moot point. But I also want to play some context here in terms of who Jesse Waters' mother is, okay, because she's hilarious. So when Jesse Waters took over the Fox News primetime slot when Tucker Carlson was ejected, his mother was a call-in guest. And I thought it was obviously he loves his mother and his mother loves him, as you'll see in this clip. But I did think it was kind of strange that somebody who is such a stalwart right-wing propagandist would dare play this clip. But this is from the first episode of Jesse Waters' Tucker Carlson replacement show. This is his mother on air.
We have a very special guest on the line, a Democrat, my mom. Mom?
Hello there, Jesse.
Hello there, Mom. How have you enjoyed the show so far?
I have enjoyed the show. I want to say congratulations, Honey Bun. We are so proud of you and your accomplishments, and you've worked so hard. Now let's aim to have you keep your job. And to that end, I do have some suggestions.
Okay.
Do not tumble into any conspiracy rabbit holes. We do not want to lose you, and we want no lawsuits.
Okay.
In keeping, I have a list here. In keeping with the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. We need you to be kind and respectful. You yourself mentioned that humble is a stretch, so I get that. Use your voice responsibly to promote conversation that maintains a narrative thread. There really has been enough Biden bashing, and the laptop is old. Perhaps you could suggest that your people take less interest, for example, in other people's bodies, and talk about that.
Hilarious. And she went on a tear. She was absolutely spitting, as the kids would say. And there's some clips as well of text messages that that Jesse Waters' mom has sent. We are a nation of laws. Please tone down the strident attack on our court system. You end up presenting as lacking a moral compass, honey. We all know you are a trumpet. You need not scream it. You do not have the expertise nor the knowledge to question the special counsel's investigation until you know what they know. Hush, Jesse. Please bring just a tad more measured caution to your heretofore overly excited support of this president. Of course, this was from the Trump era. You are presenting as really out there, Jesse. And above all, please stay in your wheelhouse. You can have an opinion, but let's acknowledge that you have no legal expertise. So, it was definitely a great comment by Jessica Tarlov, who was pointing out that, hey, your mom is a pretty strident Democrat. But again, what I just find so interesting is their utter perplexion, and Joe Rogan's utter perplexion for that matter, that, the Democratic Party can still turn out higher numbers than the Republicans and not be motivated by a cultish devotion to a particular person. I would simply encourage you all, if you have not yet, to go check this article out. The media still doesn't get Biden voters, again, in which Grossman challenges centrists and independents and conservatives to do for the left what they demand the left do for them, which is to try to understand the Trump supporters. Well, given that Biden supporters, as we say, or Democrats, people who are democratically aligned, represent a majority of the country, even as unpopular as he is, very likely the Democratic candidate will win the popular vote. It happened in 2016, happened in 2020. It's happened every time in the past 30 plus years, except in 2004 with President Bush's reelection. So perhaps in this case, instead of just the majority trying to understand the minority, perhaps the minority should try to understand the majority. Let me know what you think in the comments.